attention to us. Now, Jesus asked over 100 questions, so this series is not going to be that long. It's not going to be exhaustive. Probably have one more. But in any case, today we're going to look at a very important one. We're going to examine the question from the Savior that comes from the only miracle that he performed that has been recorded in all 4 Gospels. So certainly that signifies that this is a very, very important miracle to be recorded in all 4 Gospels. And it was considered to be central to the formation of the disciples' understanding of Jesus as the Messiah. What was about to happen would help develop a correct understanding of Jesus and who he really was. Not just a good man or even a prophet, but the very Son of God. So Jesus came out of seclusion and rest and saw a great crowd assembled. 5,000 men, the scriptures say, but with additional women and children, it could have easily been 15,000, between 10 and 15,000 people. Think about that. That's a lot, folks. And as they gathered together, Jesus began to address their needs. They had a hunger in their hearts. They had a hunger for truth. They had heard many different claims from many different places about many different gods or people who would be called gods. And they wanted to know the truth. Not a whole lot different than today, is it? Jesus saw their need, and he had compassion, which means he did something. The scriptures say he had compassion. Many, just looking at this parable, this account, would say, well, obviously their need was for bread. Jesus shows us that their primary need was for truth and understanding. And what did he do first? He didn't feed them first. He didn't feed them physical bread first. First, he taught them. You know, so often we hear in the church, well, we're supposed to serve. Well, we're also supposed to teach. Our service and our proclamation of the gospel go hand in hand. They're integral to one another. And so the very first thing Jesus did to meet their needs was to meet the hunger of their hearts, and he taught them. Just like we must teach, because there's so much errant teaching. We need to uphold the gospel of Christ. And then he met their physical need. But more about that in a moment. Now, it seems as though Jesus preached too long. I can't identify with that. But anyway, he got carried away. He preached too long. Preached into the evening. Evening was coming. And the disciples said, well, you're going to have to send this huge group of people away because we're out in the middle of nowhere. There's not even a McDonald's close by. You know, you're going to have to send them away to get their own food. We can't handle it. And Jesus amps up the tension by saying the disciples are to give them something to eat. To their ears, it must have sounded like an absurd request. And they reply a bit sarcastically. And they say, in essence, should we go and spend $30,000, which was what is what it would be in today's currency. Should we go and spend $30,000 to feed all these folks? Like, are you kidding? Where are we going to get this? In the Gospel of John, we find out that God worked in a marvelous way through Jesus that day. Jesus had a special attention for this. In John 6, 5 to 7, when Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked this, you see, only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. So he was testing the disciples. You know what is more important than taking an assessment of a situation? What is more important than dealing prudently and wisely with a situation? What is most important is asking Jesus what his intentions are for that situation. What does he have in mind? Isn't that what Jesus does all the time? He partners with us to do what he already has a mind to do in and through us. He is saying, I have something in mind for you, and it's immeasurably beyond what you could think or imagine. It's something you want to participate in with me, and it will lead to your great joy and my glory. When was the last time that you or we as a church stepped out in that way? In such a way that if God didn't show up, it wouldn't work. If it worked, we knew it had to be God. Oh, we can always come up with excuses. Moses said, "I can't speak." Abraham said, "I'm too old." Jeremiah said, "I'm too young." Saul said to David, "You're just a kid and that guy's huge." Mary said, "I'm a virgin." Ananias said that Saul's one of the bad guys. And here, Jesus is saying, feed these folks. And the disciples are saying, the job's too big. And then comes the question that I want you to focus on today. Here it is. Jesus asked them, "How many loaves do you have?" How many loaves do you have? Jesus isn't interested in what they don't have, but rather what they do have. You see, if we give God what we have, and there on that mountainside, those few loaves and fishes, they must have seemed ridiculous. How are we going to feed 15,000 people with this one basket of food? But Jesus said, "Give me what you have. Give me what you have, and he will give us his abundance." Now, when we give God what we have, whatever that may be, whether it's our finances, whether it's our time, whether it's our willingness, whether it's our engagement, whether it's our participation in ministry, whatever our little is, if we give that to him, and he gives back to us in abundance, as he multiplied all of those loaves and fishes and fed everyone with leftovers, I guess he was showing off a bit. When he does that in our lives, is that for us? See, this is where the prosperity gospel goes wrong. This prosperity gospel stops there and says, "Oh yeah, you know, if you put a quarter in the divine vending machine, you'll get back $5. What a deal." No, that's not what's being said here. What's being said is, you give me your little, I'll give you a lot, so that you can use it to serve others. God gives us in abundance only so we can serve others. When I was growing up in the Chestnut Hill Baptist Church in Philadelphia, they had to practice every once in a while. About once a month, I guess, we would have a box lunch. I don't know if anybody does that anymore, but you remember. We used to hand out a little flat, unfolded box, white box. Everybody got them the Sunday before the dinner or the lunch and took them home, and you were supposed to fix lunch and put it in the box, and then the next Sunday we'd all get together after church and we'd switch boxes, right? Well, my Sunday school teacher was Aunt Betty. We called her Aunt Betty. And there was a boy in the class with me. His name was Joe. And Joe had kind of a hard family life. He didn't have a whole lot. But he came to church, he came to Sunday school, and he came to church every week, many times by himself. And so church ended, and we gathered in Fellowship Hall for our meal, and we all sat down. He happened to sit down in front of, or across from rather, Aunt Betty. Now, Aunt Betty was a widow, and she was a wonderful, gracious, and loving person. But one of the things that Aunt Betty could do is she could cook. Could that woman cook? And so, Joey, he brought the only thing he had, the only thing he could bring. He brought a little peanut butter sandwich. That was all that was in his box. So he slides his box over to Aunt Betty, and Aunt Betty opens the box and she picks up the sandwich and she says, "Oh, Joey, I love peanut butter. Thank you, honey." And then she slides her box over to him, and he opens it. Beautifully crisp, perfectly fried chicken. I guess you'd call them JoJo's. Handmade, homemade coleslaw. I mean, Joey hit the bonanza of food, right? So he gives Aunt Betty a peanut butter sandwich, and Aunt Betty gives him a banquet. You understand that that's what Jesus did on the mountain. He told his followers for all time and eternity, you're not going to be able to serve the need of humanity by yourself. You're not going to be able to serve your community by yourself. But you give me what you have. And if you're willing to give me your little, I will do what you couldn't do, so that others may be served. We read in John 6, Jesus says, "Verily, verily, I tell you, it's not Moses who has given you the bread from heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is the bread that comes down from heaven and gives life to the world.